This video is to answer a simple question. Is spelling important? After all, do you pay attention to your spelling in everyday life? You know, when you send a text message, for example, or when you take notes. How much attention do you pay your spelling? Do you check your spelling? Do you check it is correct? Or, you know, you just send it like that. Tap, 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 send. Tap, 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 send, without checking. The thing is, today we live in a world that is fast. Speed has become very important. And we demand an instant response. When we chat to someone, we expect an answer back, you know, like that. So people tend to tap, 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 type and send a message without checking the spelling. So nowadays we tend to shorten our words, we tend to take shortcuts with our spelling without checking it, and that has an impact on the way we spell words. But then we still understand what you've written. We still understand your message, even with all these shortcuts. So the question is, well, if we understand your message and, you know, you don't really pay attention to your spelling, then is spelling important? That's a good question. Are you able to read this text? Did you understand this text? Did you have any difficulty reading the text? Was it all fine? Was it okay? Now here is, you know, the text with the right spelling. I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter what orders the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. So when you read that, and you're like, well, is spelling important if, you know, I can still understand it even with all these jumbled up words? Well, it's not as straightforward, really, because not everyone can read that text to start with. If you're able to read that text, jumbled up words, great. But some people will have difficulty reading it, especially if your first language is not English. The second thing, the more jumbled up the center letters become, the more we will struggle to read them. Another thing is you still need to have the right letters between the first and the last letter for you to be able to read it. So how can you remember the letters between the first and the last letters when it is all jumbled up? That would be a difficult task. And another thing, have a look at this word. This word is jumbled up. What do you read? Which word do you read here? Did you read expect or accept? Expect and accept have exactly the same letters, spelling a bit different. But when it is all jumbled up, you cannot make a difference between these two. This jumbled up text, however, does explain why proofreading is not an easy task. I mean, it's easy to miss a misspelling. So especially when you read the text quickly, very quickly, like it is more likely for you to miss a spelling mistake than if you read more slowly your text. So it's a good question to ask, well, if it is hard to proofread, how do we proofread? What can we do to spell check our work? How can we check our spelling? That's something I will tell you a bit later. Because before I tell you that, I would like you to have a look at another text. And that other text is this one. Right, what do you think of this following text? There is a beautiful church in my village. The church was built by the Romans, but it burned down. The parishioners have raised the money to build another church. That church is much bigger than the former church. Did you like that text? Did you find it easy to read? Or were you like, what's going on? Why have I got 5 different spellings for the word church? Because, yeah, we had 5 different spellings for the word church. And the thing is, I haven't made these spelling ups. These spellings of the word church did exist in Middle Ages. Medieval Ages period, in the manuscript, you saw different types of spelling for church, and these are 5 examples out of many more. The thing is, before we had the printing press in England, which was in 1476, people spelled words however they wanted, however they liked. They just spelled it, the words, according to how they sounded to them. So you can imagine that people from the south of England and people from the north of England, or from Scotland, or from Wales, from Ireland, from Cornwall, Yorkshire, and so on, there are different ways of saying church in their own language, what we call dialects. Dialects are different types of English language. Still English language, but with variations. So the way church was said in the south of England, or in London, or in Cornwall, or in Wales, or Yorkshire, or Scotland, and so on, was a bit different. So if you spelled your word the way it sounded to you, then you've got a wealth of different spelling for the word church, or any other words. And sometimes, in the same book, you could actually find the same word spelled differently. So in the same book, by the same author, by the same writer, the word church could be spelled differently, because there was no standardized spelling until the advent of the printing press. I say until the advent of the printing press started, well, we had it in 1476, but then it took some time before we standardized spelling. I mean, the press is here, overnight we have a standard spelling. No, it didn't work that way. It wasn't overnight. It took years, about 150 years, before we got a standard spelling. Why am I showing you this text? It's because I find it difficult to read a text with different spellings. I mean, just imagine, like the word she, S-H-E. Okay? According to Melvin Bragg in his book, The Adventure in English, there were over 60 different spellings of the word she. 60 different ways of spelling she, S-H-E, which is quite mind-blowing. Even in the same sentence, there was a courtier from the time of James I, and James I became king in 1603. Just to highlight my point here. Within the same sentence, he spelled the word clothes differently. He started like, this is a sentence. He was of a middle stature, more corpulent, though in his clothes than in his body. Yet fat enough, his clothes being ever made large and easy. Clothes, he used 2 different spellings for that word when he described James I. And Shakespeare himself didn't spell his name in the same way every single time. These are the 5 different spellings that Shakespeare used for his own name. William Shakespeare, not sure how to say them. But these are the 5 different spellings of his names. I don't know if you noticed, but he didn't use the spelling that we use today for his own name, Shakespeare. Not even sure if he ever used the spelling of Shakespeare like we use it today. We're not even sure of that, because he spelled his surname differently every time. So even a great playwright like Shakespeare didn't have a standardized spelling. Another thing about spelling, I mean, I find it difficult to read a book when you cannot keep to a standard spelling. So you read that book, church will be spelled that way. You read another book, church will be spelled another way. You read another book, and then you've got a different spelling. But it's not just the word church, it's any other words where there are different spellings from 3 different books. That's very confusing to my mind. Another one that is confusing is, look at this text. The other text makes sense. The bird of implore yard, a small man yesterday, all the private of the way, agreed to the butler, saw it. It was just before horseman. The butler was with me. I resent something was happening after giving a verify to him. You're probably going to ask, what? what's going on here? What? It doesn't mean anything. It's just, what? What's all that? Doesn't make sense, does it? Now, let's have a look at this text again. Let's have a look at it again. But here I have underlined different words. All the words I've underlined was a different word to start with. It's not the original word. What I've done is replacing the original word with a synonym. Synonym, S-Y-N-O-N-Y-M, is a technical word to say a different word with the same meaning. For example, beautiful and pretty are synonyms. The word beautiful, the word pretty have about the same meaning, so they are synonyms. I've done that with that text. For example, in the bird of implore, different word, a synonym for implore. What could be a synonym for implore? Well, there's one, pray, P-R-A-Y. Pray is synonymous to implore. They mean about the same thing. A bird of prey, P-R-A-Y. Well, we don't say a bird of prey. Well, actually, yes, we do say a bird of prey. A bird of prey, yeah, we do say that. Bird of prey, that does exist. Yeah. It's just not prey, P-R-A-Y. It's not, imploring. It's not a bird that we implore. It's P-R-E-Y. A bird of prey is P-R-E-Y, not P-R-A-Y. Now, if you write a bird of prey P-R-A-Y, and we use a different word to show the same meaning, it becomes like a bird of implore. Now, a bird of implore doesn't mean anything because it's prey P-R-E-Y. What I'm saying here is using the wrong word get a different meaning. Prey P-R-E-Y and prey P-R-A-Y are what we call homophones. H-O-M-O-P-H-O-N-E. A homophone is when you have words with the same pronunciation but the spelling is different. Prey being one, because when I say prey, it could be spelled in two different ways, P-R-A-Y or P-R-E-Y. Now the context will tell you if we need P-R-A-Y or if we need P-R-E-Y. Two different meanings. Different spelling, different meanings, because two different words. Homophones using the wrong spelling for a word that sounds the same is a common mistake. And here my text is to illustrate how confusing it is to use the wrong word. Because when you read the text and when you use the wrong spelling, like prey, then we've got a different meaning. And the reader pauses, like, that doesn't mean anything, it doesn't make sense. At some point, the reader will probably having like a moment, oh, it means prey with an E, not an A. Right, got it. Now, let's have a look at the text with the original spelling. Okay? So this is the text with the original spelling. The bird of prey, with an A, caught a small hare yesterday. All the personnel are the manor, except the butler, saw it. It was just before night. The butler was with me. I knew something was happening after giving a check to him. The words underlined here, wrong spelling. Homophones, remember, same pronunciation, different spelling. So the pronunciation in itself should give you an idea of what we mean, like the bird of prey caught a small hare yesterday. Caught from catch, C-A-U-G-H-T, that's what we mean, not caught, C-O-U-R-T, but caught, C-A-U-G-H-T, and hare, not what you got on top of your head, but the rabbit, H-A-R-E. Same pronunciation, different spelling. However, using that spelling kind of is confusing. Even from the first sentence, the bird of prey caught a small hare yesterday, you have to think a bit hard to actually realize that it is not the right spelling. The actual right spelling is here. The bird of prey caught a small hare yesterday. All the personnel, here, or the manor. Manor manor is the building. Manor, manner is a verb to do something. A lot of people confuse these two words. Manor, the building, is manor, compared to manner, the verb doing something, manner. Don't confuse these two, because it's very confusing when you see it on paper. Except, not accept, but except, the butler saw it. It was just before night. Now night, day and night, not many people will make the mistake between, the horseman, night with a K, and night, day and night. But they are homophones. The butler was with me. I knew something was happening, knew with a K this time. After giving a check, here we go, to him. Except are not two homophones actually, except, there's a bit of a different pronunciation, so they are not exactly homophones, but are confused. But you still need to pay attention to the spelling of these confusable words. There are some words that have about the same pronunciation and exactly the same, but about the same, that people get confused as well. Now, those that tend to be confused are the following, like have and of, especially in I could have done, when you shorten it to I could have done it, 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 I could have done it. Some people will put OF instead of HAVE. It could have. But the thing with have and of, when you speak quickly, have becomes of. I could have done it, whether than I could have done it. But even though you say of done it, it's still HAVE, not OF. As, with or without an H, so that confused. The usual there, 3 different spellings, lose and loose. Pronunciation is a bit different, but these two I confused so many times. Were and where, same thing, these two are confused so many times, even though the pronunciation is similar but not exactly the same. Including are and our, I saw them confused. Or your, these two, typical. Quiet and quiet, these two are quite often confused as well. Effect and effect, collage and collage. That's not an exhaustive list, and there are many, many more words that people get confused with. That's just a sample of the type of words, common words people get confused with. If you are in that case, I would advise you to learn the right spelling, because it is important for you to use a right spelling. Because it is very much difficult to read a text when the spelling is not what it should be. So my advice is, if there are some words you're not sure about, these confusable words, these homophones, to learn about them. I mean, there are loads of resources on the internet, loads of lists of homophones and confusable words. But that's something you need to work on, to have a look at, and to especially practice on the spelling. Get to know the difference between these words, to use them properly. So, to answer my question, is spelling important? The answer is very. Spelling is very important, because it's not just you that needs to understand your own text. It's the person reading you that needs to understand your own text. Now, if you are writing for just yourself, well, it's just yourself. So, okay, no one's going to check your text. You do whatever you want. But strictly speaking, you should make an effort to actually use the right spelling, even though you write for yourself and only for yourself, because you don't want a certain spelling to become a habit. So when you write to yourself, you tend to make that spelling mistake, but just to yourself, so it's fine. However, when you write for someone else, you will probably use the same spelling mistake when you write for someone else, because you are in the habit of spelling that word that way. So even when you write just for yourself, like a diary, it's actually better for you to use the right spelling, because by practicing the right spelling, it becomes a habit to use the right spelling. Have in mind that when you write something, a letter for someone else is going to read it. And that person needs to understand your words, your letter. If you use the wrong spelling, it is confusing. For the people reading your letter, it is confusing. An anecdote for you. There was a company that put their admin staff through an English course. Why did they do that? Because it happened that the admin staff sent letters to their customers. And there are some customers who corrected the spelling mistakes that they found on the letter, and then posted the letter back to the company. That didn't look good on the company. Manager was like, oh, what's going on? So at some point, the manager realized that to appear professional, they needed to actually start to pay more attention to their spelling. So in short, pay attention to your spelling. It is very important. And in the business world, it shows you are professional. Now, I mentioned that it is hard to actually spell check, because when you read a text, you read the whole word rather than, every single letter of it. So it is quite easy to overlook a spelling mistake. So what can we do to change that? What can we do to actually spot a spelling mistake? Well, we've got three different types of situations. Three different types of situations. The first one being words that you tend to misspell. Now, it's possible that you know yourself because your teacher or your friend or your parents, siblings, friend, whoever tells you that, you made a spelling mistake here. You made that spelling mistake again. You did it again, same spelling mistake. So there are some words that you misspell. Well, if you are aware that you struggle with the spelling of these words, my advice is, check all these words you tend to misspell. Like, for example, confusing there, T-H-E-I-R, and there, T-H-E-R-E. If you confuse these two words, if you know that you use the spelling T-H-E-R-E instead of T-H-E-I-R, or vice versa, then when you write a letter, for example, check all your there. Just look at your letter, okay, check all the there to make sure you have used the right spelling. Like would be like a targeted spelling check. You target the words that you have that you struggle with. So that's one way of spell checking your text. Check the words you make a mistake with. That would imply that you need to know yourself. Know yourself. Know yourself, i.e., know your weaknesses in spelling. And that requires some work, like, especially, if you use Word, Microsoft Word, for example, a Word application, a Word document, there's a proofreading functionality inbuilt into these applications. And the proofreading functionality underlines your mistakes. Red underline to show your spelling mistakes. So when you use Word, your computer spell check your work. So you can see the type of spelling mistakes you make. And maybe you should make a note of this type of spelling mistakes you make so that you know which one you need to improve on and to check next time you write something. Now, the second situation is a tricky one. Because the second situation is about words that you don't actually know how to spell. Has it ever happened to you that you spell a word that way every single time, all your life until one day a colleague, for example, tells you, oh, you spell that word wrongly. And you're like, what? I've always spelled that word that way. And that's, a word you don't actually know you cannot spell. And if you don't know that you don't spell it properly, then how do you know that you made a spelling mistake to start with? So that's a very difficult one to spot. One way to spot it is, getting someone to read your text. Getting someone else to read your work. And then hopefully they will spot mistakes that you make. And having that situation, spelling mistake here, and you're like, I would have spelled that word that way. Well, that's a mistake. Shouldn't be spelled that way. Really? Yeah. And so on and so on. Same thing with using a word application with a proofreading functionality, and the application underlines your mistakes, and you're like, oh, it underlined that word in red. Why? How do I spell that word that way? So that way the mistakes you make. Having said that, do bear in mind that a proofreader is not 100% accurate. A proofreader does not highlight all the mistakes, especially homophones. Remember, words that have the same sound but are spelled differently. A spell checker or a proofreader does not always make the difference between two words with the same pronunciation, so they don't highlight the mistake. Proofreaders are good, they're making better, but they're not perfect. Do check if your proofreader is set as American spelling or British spelling, because sometimes it is American spelling, so it will underline mistakes because you use a British spelling, when actually it's not a mistake. You just need to change your language to British spelling so that it will show British spelling. There are some words, words that people tend to misspell without knowing that it is a misspelling. Typical one is the word program. Program, P-R-O-G-R-A-M-M-E. A lot of people spell it the American way, program, P-R-O-G-R-A-M. And some people don't even realize that in British spelling, it's actually A-M-M-E, not just A-M. A-M is American spelling, but in British spelling is A-M-M-E. So a program for an event is A-M-M-E. Having said that, just to confuse you a little bit more, nowadays, when we talk about an application, an IT program, we tend to use the American spelling even in Britain. So when we talk about a program, an IT application, then like an artificial intelligence program, AM, because program here refers to IT, to technology. But when we talk about the program of an event, the program of a school, the program of a club, it's A-M-M-E, the British spelling. So we've got this situation as well due to technology when we have adopted a bit more the American spelling. Our third situation is complete new words. Words you have never heard of before. It's like, what? If you have never heard the word before, then how do you spell it? It's a bit difficult. Does anyone know how to spell erinaceous?
Erinaceous.
Erinaceous. So how do you spell that word? Hard one, isn't it? If you don't know that word, it's quite difficult to spell it. It's spelled this way. E-R-I-N-A-C-E-O-U-S. What means is relating to or resembling hedgehogs. So it's in relation to hedgehogs, the animal. The sound can give a clue, especially the first part, eri, ne, shes. The second part could be spelled in different ways, and that's the issue. Erinaceous rhymes with the words vicious or cautious. But then you'll notice that the shes of erinaceous and the shes of vicious and the shes of cautious, vicious and cautious, erinaceous, different spelling. Different endings for the same sound. And that's our issue. According to Bill Bryson in Mother Tongue, there are up to 14 ways to write the sound sh in the English language. Up to 14 ways to write the sound sh. So if you hear a word for the first time, then you have to check it. There's no other ways. You need to ask someone who knows how to spell that word, how to spell it, use a dictionary, but, you have to find the right spelling. Because sometimes it's not evident, obvious how to spell it. So my advice is, at home or at work, use a proofreader if you can. But don't rely entirely on it because, as I mentioned before, a proofreader does not spot every single mistake. I mean, it's very good, but there are some mistakes they could miss. So if possible, get someone else to proofread your work. Now, at home or at work or during your exam, when you proofread, when you've got that time to proofread your work, do slow down when you read your work to check the spelling. Slow down. I know you have a time limit if it is an exam, but you don't have a time limit if it is work or home. But do slow down because it will help you finding spelling mistakes. I would also advise you, if possible, to read your work aloud. The thing is, when you read slowly and aloud, that gets you to actually look at the letters more closely. So you are more likely to spot a spelling mistake when you actually read aloud and slowly. You also need to be in a quiet environment. So if you are in a noisy area at work, for example, put yourself somewhere else in a quiet environment to proofread your work because you need to concentrate on it. Another tip for you, it has been proved that you are better at spell checking your work in the morning, when you are fresh and awake. Avoid spell checking your work when you are tired because you are more likely to miss a spelling mistake. Having said that, if you are sitting on an exam, you've got a time limit, and that you are tired or not, you cannot take a break. But that's when you are on an exam. If you're not on an exam, if you do it at home or at work, do take a break if you are tired. Take a break, go out for fresh air before you actually proofread your work. It is actually better to stop writing and then stand up, have a break, go somewhere else, the kitchen, outside, pick your fresh air, come back to your desk, and then proofread your work. Have a break. You are more likely to find spelling mistakes when you had a break compared to not having a break. But again, if you are sitting on an exam, you cannot have a break. But otherwise, if you can, do have one. I hope that in this video I've made my point very clear about why spelling is important and why you should pay attention to spelling. I'm going to finish this video with a fun fact. So here we go, fun fact. In America, the USA, they have a National Proofreading Day since 2011. They celebrate the National Proofreading Day every year on the 8th of March. There we go. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you.